On the top of Chaf Aleph from the base, mitzvah shiny, wearing tefillin is a mitzvah, and therefore we're going to be matir him, we're going to be makil, that even on day 2, although until he fulfills Mitzvah Yom Kekulo, day 2 is also considered Avelis Chamura, nevertheless, he's allowed to wear his tefillin, and once we allow him to wear his tefillin and fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin, Shuvei Nacholitz. Are there situations where, for the sake of a poor person, we're going to allow this Avel who's poor to get involved in Malacha? And it says, Afilu Onia Mispanis Minat Tzedakah, even if he's so poor that he depends upon tzedakah to feed his family. Nevertheless, malacha b'farhesia, public malacha for an avel is asur, but mikam yelich osu b'tzina b'toch beisa. In the balance of avelis, after the first 3 days of avelis chamura, will be making, will lighten the burden of avelis, will allow him to work in his house privately, b'tzina, and there he can get involved in malacha. This is very important in our day and age, when so many people work from their homes, on computers and Zoom and long distance and whatever they do. Now, for a person who's not an Avel, it seems that he has to wait until after Shiva to allow Malacha, even inside his house, B'tzina. So this is a special dispensation for an Ani. And for Isha, a female who's in Avelis and she's a pauper, is Tove B'felach B'toch Beisa. She can spin her needle, her spindle, B'tzina, inside her house, in order to support her family. Now, why does the Brisa single out Tvia B'pelach? He says, an impoverished woman may take up a spindle after the 3rd day of Shiva in order to provide for herself. Spindle work is considered casual and discreet, and is more appropriate during Shiva than strenuous occupations. Ramban says that even strenuous occupations would be mutter b'tzina if she cannot provide for herself by spinning the spindle. He's not allowed to go from his own base Avel to visit another base Avel during the first 3 days that are so severe. He can't be, but during the balance of the last 4 days of Avelus, he's allowed to go into another base Avel and sit Shiva with the other Avel. Make sure that he sits together with the other Avel. Now, I was wondering, again, this is just my conceptual analysis, not for Daf Yomi, but it could be that there are 2 dimensions to Avelus. One is Kavod Ames, and the other is Kavod Achai, that we come to be menachel and support and lift up the spirits of the Avel. With regard to an Avel picking up and sitting Shiva with the other Avelim in another bias, I think he would forfeit the kiyum of Kavod Ames. So when the Menachemim come into the house of Avel X, and there be Menachem Y, who comes from a different base Avel, that would be purely a Bein Adam L'Chavero to uplift the spirits of the Avel, but it would not be a kiyum of Kavod Ames, which is limited and restricted to the base Avel. Tana Rabbana, we learned to the Brisa. Now we have a whole sugya about greetings. And an Avel for the first 3 days is Asur B'Sheila Shalom. He's not allowed to say Shalom Aleichem to someone else. But Mishloshav Ad Shiva, although we're not going to allow him to say Shalom Aleichem, but Meshiv, if somebody says Shalom Aleichem to him, he's allowed to respond and give a greeting to the person who greeted him. After Shiva, Shol Meshiv Kedarka. We're going to see that that's not so simple, and it could be there are other shittas that will come up here in the sugya that for the entire Shloshim there's an Isur Shel Shalom. But right now, in the first Brisa number 1, we'll see Brisa number 2 later, the Isur of Shel Shalom only applies to Shiva. And we divide it up into the 2 parts of Shiva, 3 and 4. During the first 3, he doesn't even respond if somebody initiates Shel Shalom. In the last 4 days, although he doesn't initiate Shel Shalom, he can be made. And it reminds us of Sugyas and Kriyat. Bein HaParshas, when are you allowed to respond to someone's greetings? Is that really true that you're not allowed to greet others during the first 3 days of Avelus? But Tanya, we have a second Brisa. This is Brisa number 2. Maisu Mesu Bonav Shel Rabbi Akiva. Now, in this sugya that we're about to learn, it seems that there's a kiyum of nicham avelim and possibly hesped as well that goes to the avel himself, meaning leaving out covered mess for a moment. Nitlu to kol yisrael v'spidum hesped gadol, and it seems that the great eulogy here of Kol Yisrael was an act of respect for Rabbi Akiva, the father who had lost, who is now in Ovel. B'shas Katirasam, Rabbi Akiva wanted to thank them, these masses and throngs of Jewish people who came for this Hesped Gadol. Rabbi Akiva al Safsal Gadol v'Yomar. He stood up high and he declared, Achenu Beis Yisrael Shimu. Please listen to what I have to say. Afilu Shnei Banim Chasanim Menuchim Hu B'Shvil Kovach Hasisem. Even had I lost 2 Banim Chasanim. Banim Chasanim means married sons. Nevertheless, the Hesped Gadol that you gave is menucha. Menucha means it's a nechama for me. Just one sec. What does he say here? Yeah, it doesn't. Okay. So again, how much more so here? He only lost 1 son. The imbishvil akiva bosem. And if this great eulogy was for my honor, that I don't deserve that honor. But when you are honoring me, you aren't honoring me, you are honoring my Torah. I represent Torah. I am a personification of Torah in the sense that Rabbi Akiva was in charge. He had the responsibility of transmitting the Torah to the next generation. Elakach amartem, you have fulfilled the requirement of David HaMelech and Tilim, Toras Elokav Belibo, that the person who transmits Torah has the Torah of God in his heart. So basically, Rabbi Akiva is consenting, or conceding, maybe would be a better word, to recognize that the great eulogies here were for his honor, but he's just saying it's not my honor personally, it's the honor of the Torah. I represent the honor of the Torah. And you have a double reward. And here, it's a question of the girsa here. We keep it to comfort from the fact that as a result of the death of his son, this was a cause of a great display of honor for the Torah. And now he says to them, this is the part that we're interested in, go home in peace. So we see that Rei Akiva was Shoel B'Shalom, and it was right at the beginning of the Shiva. And the Gemara says, covered the Rabbim Shain. When he said, L'chula v'teichem shalom, that was a cover for the rabbin. In other words, The Isur Shel Shalom is vis-a-vis a yachid. You're saying shalom to an individual, but here you're saying shalom to the rabbi. That's already a different dimension of Torah. The balance from day 3 to the end of Shiva, he's not allowed to initiate shalom, but he can respond to shalom. According to this brisa, there's no restrictions whatsoever after Shiva regarding Sheila Shalom. And we ask a question from a second brisa. If he encounters his friend who's an Avelus during 30 days, he can console him within Shloshim. But Eino Shoel B'Shlomo. He can offer condolences, but he doesn't greet him. And now we're talking during Shloshim, so this is the first time we're seeing a prohibition of Sheila Shalom during Shloshim. Liachar Shloshim Yom, Shol B'Shlomo, Ve'ena Medabrim O Tanchum. And I think that when it says Eino Medabrim O Tanchumin, it means he's not required to be Menachem, but if he does so, that's fine. He certainly is Mekayim a mitzvah of Tanchum. Mesa Ishto V'Nasa Ishacheres. Let's say, for example, he doesn't have any children, so he's allowed to get married within Shloshim, the loss of his wife. Now, this has to do with like insulting the sensitivities of the new wife, to come into the house and start, consoling him over the loss of his wife when he's married to a second woman. That we don't allow. Mitzvah b'shur, if he encounters him outside in public, omolo b'safa rafa b'choved rush. He can be menachem the avel, because he can't do it inside the house, but he can do it outside in the marketplace. So according to this last brisa, we see clearly that there's an Isur of Sheila Shalom even after Shiva during Shloshim. The other brisa said that once Shiva is over, then he can initiate. There's no din of Avelis anymore after Shiva, as far as initiating Sheila Shalom. So this is a fundamental question. Is there an Isur Sheila Shalom in Shloshim? It's a steer between two brises. And Rav Idi Bar Ovid, he comes to reconcile these two brisos. Who shol b'shalom acherim, shacherim shurim b'shalom. Acherim ein sholem b'shlomo, shu eino shorim b'shalom. So what is Rav Idi Bar Ovid, what is he saying over here? And we're focused on the period of time after Shiva during Shloshim. So who shoel b'sholem acherim? So acherim means those who aren't in Avelus. They're called Shruya b'sholem. So it means there would be more makil on the Avel than on the people. This is really strange. Who shol b'sholem acherim? He's allowed to initiate greetings. But acherim ain't sholem b'shlomo, because he's still in Avelus. And this is after Shiva. So the difference between the two brisos, says Rav Idi, is that the brisa that extends the Isur Sheila Shalom beyond Shiva to Shloshim, that brisa is talking about other people who want to initiate Sheila Shalom to him, and that they're not allowed to do. And the Bryce that says after Shiva, there's no issue Sheila Shalom, that's addressing the Avel because he himself can initiate Sheila Shalom. So the Gemara asks for Hamidik Tani Meshiv. Right in the first Brisa, it says that he can be Meshiv B'Shalom after Shiva. I'm sorry, that after the first 3 days of Shiva, he's allowed to be Meshiv. Meshiv means that we initiated greetings to him, and he's responding, he's reciprocating. His Michlal did Shailina Lei, should imply and derive the conclusion that they're allowed to be Shalom with Shalom. Where you're telling me, according to the last Brisa, that others are not allowed to be Shalom with Shalom even after Shloshim. Kolshkein after Shiva. When it says Dilo Yadi, that it's true that one should not initiate Sheila Shalom to an Avel even after Shloshim, but the Brisa, which says that after Shiva everything is okay, that's talking about a case where the Sheila Shalom was really illegal, but they didn't realize that he was an Avel. So he's allowed to respond as long as he's passed the first 3 days of Shiva. So the Gemara asks, if you're telling me that the Bryce is talking about a case where the Shoel was ignorant of the fact that this guy is an Avelus, and in such a case, the Avel himself is allowed to respond. So in a Hasam Nami, even in the case where he was greeted during the first 3 days of Shiva, we should also allow him to be Meshiv Shalom. Why does the Brisa say that he's only allowed to be Meshiv Shalom and respond after the first 3 days? It should be allowed even during the first 3 days. And the Gemara answers, Hasam Modalahu Velo Mahadalahu. The halacha of the first 3 days is that you have to tell the person, Modia, you have to notify him that he's an oven during the first 3 days, and there's no Meshiv B'Shalom, he's not allowed to be Meshiv B'Shalom. But Hacha here, Lo Tzarech Lo De'inu, once we get to the balance of the 3 days, and somebody inadvertently, not knowing that you're a novel, extends greetings to you, you don't have to notify him that you're a novel. You pass the first 3 days of intense averus. Now, we were raising a question earlier, which now I think is the time to come back to. Is it possible to be menachem the Avel after Shlosh? And we came to the conclusion that even if we're going to allow Sheila Shalom after Shlosh, we're not going to allow Nicham Avelim after Shlosh. So for a minute, what are you going to do with the following Brisa? Motze es Chavero Avel is betoch Shloshim Yom and Damar Yimot Tanchum. You're telling me that even after Shiva and Shloshim, there's no Tanchumi Avel. Here in this Brisa is Toch Tanchumi Avel for an entire year for the loss of a mother or father. Toch Shnei V'Sar Chodesh. Okay, Ein Shol B'Shlomo, that's fine. We said there's an issue of initiating Shalom to a novel even after Shloshim. But as far as Tanchumen is concerned, that extends even beyond Shloshim and encompasses all 12 days the first year. The Achar Shnei V'Sar Chodesh Shol B'Shlomo Ve'Ein Medaber Ino Tanchumen. You're allowed to initiate Shalom after the first year, because we said that even as far as the period of time after Shloshim, you don't initiate Shalom. And as far as Tanchuma is concerned, up to 12 months, but not beyond. After 12 months, there's no Tanchuma. He can indirectly comfort him. You know, he's not allowed to mention explicitly that so-and-so died and you were a novel, but he can somehow comfort him in an indirect way. He should be comforted, just saying in a very general way. Omer Rabbi Meir, Amotzi es Chavero Oval li'achar 12 chodesh medaber imo tanchumin. If a person offers tanchumin after 12 months, which is the opinion here of the Tanakama, says Rabbi Meir, that's ridiculous. L'mau doma li'olam shenishba raglo v'choisa v'tzo rofi amalo klach etzli shani shovra ver'pe'enu k'dei shetelech you broke a leg and now it's been mended and now you go to a Rofi, he says I'm going to break it for you a second time so that you'll appreciate what I do for you when I give you a remedy and a cure. Here too, the man finished a velus of 12 months and now you're going to be menachem him as if to say, dig up the mourning, the grief. Let's start it again so I can be menachem. And that's against what we quoted earlier, that you're allowed to be menachem, avelim, even after 12 months. Just 1 second. Right. There's a very intense avelus for the lost nebuch of one of the two parents. But with regard to other relatives, then once we pass Shloshim, the avelus is gone. And you can be Shol B'Shlomo after Shloshim. That's on Shar Krov, but on Av the Imo, we're going to say that the avelus goes for the entire year, and there's no Sheila Shom to greet him until after that year has passed. So Gmeres Hasanami Yidaber Imam Tarchumim and Atzad. So in the case where he lost one of the other relatives, and Shloshim is passed, and now he's in Yud Beis Chodesh, why don't we say that we could be menachem, be ovel, but minat sad in an indirect way? And the Brisa seems to assume that there's no nichem avelim after Shloshim. Why not be menachem ovel in an indirect way, minat sad? And where it says Einochinam, you're allowed Mayenu Medabrim Tanchumin Kidako. You shouldn't do a direct nichem avelim, so to speak, to start his feelings of avelus from the beginning. Of medaber imam and atzad. From Rabbanu, we learned to the Brisa avel shloshi yom rishonim, the intense avelus for the loss of a relative during the first 3 days of avelus is Babi Makom Karov Mona Im Moed, which means that during the first 3 days of Avelus of Shiva, if he comes and he arrives from wherever he arrives from, then he sits down and he becomes part of the Avelus of the other Avelim. And whenever Shiva ends for them, it's going to end for him. And that's because he links up to the Avelus in the first 3 days, the most severe, intense Avelus. But Bami Makom Racho, Mona Mi'atzma. If he comes from somewhere far away, even though he arrives within the first 3 days of Avelus, nevertheless, he's on his own. He's independent. He has his own counting and requirements of Shiva. But let's say it takes more than a day's travel, that's called Makom Rachab, and that separates him from the rest of the Avelim. After the first 3 days of Avelus, even if he came from around the block, he has his own count of Shiva. He's not going to just take a tramp and join the bandwagon and just finish up the last 4 days. No, he has to start from the beginning of Avelus. From Shimon Omer, Afilu Babi Yom Hashvi Makom Karov Moni. If he's coming Makom Karev, he's within a day's journey and he returns home. I don't care when it is. Even if he comes for the last hour of Shiva, then he's part of the group because he was coming from a Makom Kara. If he's coming from a close place, which is less than a day's journey, then he becomes part of the group, and he counts Shiva together with them, and he ends Shiva with them. That's only if the Gadol Abayis, the senior member, is in the house where they're observing Shiva, then a minor member, when he arrives, can integrate himself into the Shiva because of the presence of the Gadol Abayis. If the Gadol Abayis is not arrived, is not present, then whoever joins has to count on his own. So he can only be integrated into the bias because the Gadol Abayis is there in the bias. This leads us to Iboilahu, which Mirza Hashem, will pick up tomorrow. And then take this opportunity to wish you a great day.